Andrew Easton with the ESUCC here, and I'm grateful to Tom Sandberg of Wallace Public Schools and Marty Kobza of Superior Public Schools for joining us today to talk a little bit about the triggers for changes to remote learning. And so plans are, the breadth of those are vast. There's a lot of different scenarios and situations that administrators have had to deal with in going from different settings and scenarios. So what are some of those triggers in Wallace Public Schools, Tom, that have, or what kind of went into your process of establishing what triggers would lead to what mode you're in?
So obviously last year in the mid-spring, there was a major trigger for everybody, and we all were in panic mode. Mm-hmm. And our staff took about a half a day and put together a plan, and we got through the year with. So then over the summer, we took some time to think back on what went well, what didn't go so good. And we kind of knew four things going into this year. We knew that we'd be back at remote learning at some point. We knew we would have kids that would be quarantined at home. We knew that even though we weren't going to start with a mandatory mask policy, we probably would have to get to that at some point. And we also knew that everything could happen on a short notice. And so we decided to label remote learning in two ways. Active remote is what we all did last spring, and they worked on fine-tuning that. But then we decided to call the other type of remote learning for us passive remote learning. And it may not be a great way to call it, but that's what we did. And so for us, passive remote learning is the classroom is going on like it normally would. And you've got 1, 2, 3, maybe kids are out for an extended period of time, and they tune into the class. And the teacher has a laptop that could be facing the class or question work, group work, whatever, facing the board or something up there. And we're a one-to-one school. So anything in the high school, anything the kids have on their laptops, obviously the student will have the same. And we require attendance. And with elementary, it's pretty easy. They come in the morning and they're there. High school, students have to log into third period and then go out of that, get ready for fourth period, so on and so forth. So we take attendance. All classroom expectations are the same for the kids at home. Obviously with our primary grades, that looks a little different. Could be packets and paper kinds of things. But in the upper grades, assignments are due. Kids turn them in through email and Canvas. Other kind of group projects they participate in that. Just anything. It's just the same as it would for everybody else. So in terms of how it works from a teacher's standpoint, they basically have to be ready to have kids come on. Some teachers may have a different kid all day long, depending on who's out and who's not out. But it's been working pretty well. We had a chance right out of the chute to give it a shot. We had a student with a foot injury at the start of the year, and so he was home. And we launched it, and it worked, and we figured out a few things we had to do different. But all in all, it went well, and we continue with the same basic concept. We are finding that teachers are adapting to maybe telling kids, hey, all right, we're going to have you on for the first 20 minutes, and then you don't need to be for the last part of the period, or whatever. There's value in reducing screen time. And because it's not the same as in a classroom, you get pretty long sitting there. We've had a few teachers voice frustration because they recognize when they have a student at home that some of those home situations are not very conducive to a student attending a class in a remote setting. Another frustration is that some teachers felt that they weren't doing enough for those kids in the remote setting while the rest of the class was there. And we've tried to help them understand, you you've got to work with the rest of them and bring those others along, but you can't be doing a total separate program for those in this particular setting. Early October, we had to go total remote teaching because we had several staff out and we did not have enough subs. So we took 2 weeks and we did remote teaching, and it was easy just to go into it quickly because we were ready to do so. But then on the turn of that, we said, all right, we're doing mandatory mask protocol. And when we put that in place, we did have 3 families decide they did not want to send their kids to school, but they had to wear their masks. So after 1 day, 1 family sent their kids back. After 3 days, the other 2 families sent their kids back. They didn't want to put up with them. And it's been going well. And so far, we feel good with how this is working for us.
Yeah, and so to kind of synthesize some of that, I would say too, it sounds like in some instances, your hand was kind of forced to go to a different mode,
Exactly.
where other times, well, and maybe not other times, but just there was a level of intentionality that was put into place, kind of in the thinking and the trial runs, right? Like you said, with the individual who was out because of a leg injury, as the opportunity to test that kind of environment out, and before having to move to that.
Exactly.
So, Marty, I'd ask, what does that kind of look like in Superior Public Schools?
In a lot of ways, what Tom described was our experience as well. However, in the spring, of course, we were forced to move to 100% remote learning. And in early October, we had a volleyball team that came back from a tournament. And the volleyball team, we had a significant outbreak among them, which then spread to the school, which spread to the community. And we were hanging in there. We had about 30, 35 students that were out, either in isolation or quarantine. We had a couple staff members that were out. We were able to function. We got to the end of that week where it kind of started, and we were at 135 kids were out of school.
Wow.
A lot of that had to do with a little bit of panic maybe in our community. I think we had the same experience some others do, where they're talking about, well, this isn't real, or it's not going to happen here, or whatever else it may be. And then all of a sudden it did, and there was panic. And so Friday we came to school and we had 135 kids gone. So we took a week off based upon quarantine numbers and when kids were going to be coming back, staff was going to be coming back in isolation. So working with our health department there. And after that week, we've been back in school ever since. As far as kind of the model we use in the spring, in a previous district, previous state, had an opportunity. I was in a district where we had a virtual school as part of our district. And that was a full-time virtual school for homeschool kids across the state of Wyoming. And so within that, we used a product called Acellus. And Acellus is based out of Kansas City, but anyway, we use that as our primary delivery platform, self-paced type of a program. If you think of Odysseyware, which I know a lot of districts in Nebraska use, but I think a lot more video-based. It has some artificial intelligence in it, things like that. So we use that in the spring, 3 through 12. Again, in a one-to-one situation, and did packets K through 2. When we came back in the fall, we had, and again, that was somewhat due to the fact that we had some of our staff that was a little bit intimidated by the technology, and just we weren't quite where we needed to be as far as being ready for that kind of a virtual environment. So we did some work over the summer, did some work over the other things. So in October, we took a little bit different approach. Some of our staff used Acellus, were able to identify the outcomes that they were going to be working on while we were out during that period of time. Others went through Schoology in Zoom and went remote. So we had a bit of a combination going on. The other thing we had was when we started the year, we gave a choice to parents about doing a full-time virtual option. Again, Wallace was the platform for that full-time virtual option. We didn't feel like we wanted our staff to be doing double duty. In other words, Tom's model I really like. It doesn't sound like it's a lot of additional work for staff, but the way we were going to be doing it would have been. And so it was one where we felt like we didn't want them to do that. So we went with Wallace for the virtual students, and then obviously regular attendance for the others. We found out by the end of the first quarter that was not being very effective, to be quite honest with you. The students who we had at home were students who really needed to be here in many cases. And we chose to change at quarter, and everyone was to come back to school and attend in person unless there was a health issue with that particular student or someone in their household that was substantially at risk. And so we still have about 20 students in the virtual program at home working through that. We have students who, when they're quarantined, our teachers are using a combination of the virtual and the email. If it's going to be an extended period of quarantine, over 2 weeks, because we get some of those sometimes, and we'll actually assign outcomes through Wallace to them and have them work on those that particular way. But maybe a little different than Tom, but I sure like some of the things he's doing.
Yeah, and that's been, I've had a chance to visit with a number of administrators through this initiative, and there are points where everyone sort of goes, yeah, that was similar to us. And I think that these video pieces are great because there's something affirming about that everybody's kind of invested in the same work. And then at the same time, it does have its subtle nuances, as I can hear in just the two stories we're capturing here that, there are, as I was trying to kind of get to a little bit earlier, I think, certain times we are reacting to what's going on. And there's certain times where it's situational. There's times where, you're kind of proactively trying to, get ahead of rising numbers in some instances, or with the mask. I know in Tom's scenario that he was referencing earlier. And so all these certainly are triggers, factors that weigh into the decision-making process. And I certainly want to thank both Marty and Tom for joining us today and to share on this topic, and would point educators to the resources that are on this page to come around your thinking, that hopefully our conversation sparked a couple ideas for you, and just wish you the best as you go about trying to do what's in the best interest of your school, staff, and students.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Marty.
Thanks, Andrew and Tom. Appreciate it.